Welcome back to the Softensity Leadership Series. And today I have the pleasure of welcoming Scott Liniado. Scott is a vice president of product and engineering at Cox Automotive, who is responsible for Manheim's enterprise software solutions for large commercial clients. Manheim, as we know, is North America's leading provider of vehicle remarketing services, including the world's largest used vehicle marketplace. Based in our hometown of Atlanta, Scott works to build the right technology for Manheim digital product portfolio while delivering an exceptional experience to Cox Automotive's clients. Scott has over 20 years of experience in enterprise software space focused on designing, implementing, and supporting software solutions globally. Prior to joining Manheim, Scott founded a startup in the Atlanta area, CareerStream, which was later purchased by Kronos, a global workforce management solution company. While at Kronos, Scott served as in the role of increasing responsibility across product development, product management, and implementation. Scott, you graduated from our local Emory University, earning a bachelor's degree in history, which I'd love to talk more about. I always wonder how people get any earning jobs after a history degree, but you've managed to do it. He also has been the recipient of Georgia's Youth Entrepreneur of the Year Award and was awarded the Best Youth Operated Business by Business Atlanta and the Association of Corporate Growth. That was just a few years ago, right, Scott?
A couple years ago, yeah.
So honored to have you here with us today, Scott. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, history degree. I figured I was working all through college while I was at Emory, and I'd have my whole life to do business. I actually started off going the business route. Said, you know what, history is really interesting. I would really enjoy focusing on that. I enjoy reading up on it, and you always learn from your past. So. That was the road I took, and I've spent the rest of my time doing product technology, so I don't think I missed out too much.
No, certainly not. And I think you probably win every history trivia contest that exists. So you've got a leg up on the rest of us.
Yeah, I wish.
So Scott, you're with Cox Automotive, and Cox Automotive a few years ago made a really big push into outsourcing. Why did Cox Automotive go that route?
The biggest thing for us is the ability to flex up and flex down the workforce and have access to a globally diverse set of talent. I think a lot of folks at times get a little nervous when you look at, outsourcing, but I see it more as partners around the globe that can help you really staff up using the diverse talent that's out there. You have very big universities all over the world that are pumping out great engineering talent. So not using them would be a real shame. But we'd like to keep our core, base of knowledge and then augment it as we have projects go up and down over time. And it's worked well for us.
So being a graduate of a local university, I often wonder if our local universities can actually keep up with the demand that corporations have around technical talent. And that sometimes is a driver for outsourcing as well. Have you guys found that in the companies that you've worked with, Scott?
The things have slowed a little bit recently, but the demand for talent in the engineering space has always been extremely tight. And the US market, while we have a lot of great talent coming in, it's really not enough for the big corporations that are trying to staff these large projects. So I'd like to see more investment in the US, frankly, but there's other areas of the world that are really heavily focused on that, engineering discipline and getting engineers out there. I have successfully convinced my nephew to go the engineering route, so I'm trying to do more. But we are really focused on college recruiting locally here as well in Atlanta.
Excellent. Good to hear that. I've got a child in the local university here, so that's a good thing for me to hear as a mom.
Yeah.
As Cox Automotive decided to outsource, how did you decide the functions that should be outsourced versus those that are better kept in-house?
You want your core projects kept in-house, but you don't need to have a particular saying, oh, this isn't for outsourcing. This is, I think it more as an execution partner. So while things like a keep the lights on or, run only project really suit themselves well because there's not a lot of back and forth interaction, you can have success all the way up to highly innovative projects too. You just have to have that trust and connection with the offshore team and really change everything you're doing to manage a global workforce. I see a lot of times folks will try to take their existing process and layer that, onto how they're going to execute globally. And you run into challenges there versus saying, okay, things are different. I got people in time zones all over the place. How can I make this happen? But In a nutshell, things that are very well defined are going to work best. If you don't have the right talent to properly document and convey the business knowledge, you're going to have a lot harder time executing with a global team.
Yeah. And so it sounds like there's a lot of work that needs to be done inside the company to prepare for the outsourcing model. What steps did you take within Cox Automotive to prepare the organization to be successful partnering with an outsourcing vendor or set of vendors?
We really try to consolidate through COVID, actually. So as things happen, we went through consolidation for like over 100 vendors down to a couple. And in doing so, we were able to build some kind of centers of excellence across a few strategic vendors and really train up the talent on our business domain and knowledge. So you need to have that documentation. You need to have the subject matter experts working with the offshore team, making sure that they really know what you're building. And you need to build the relationships to ensure that there's a trust, even though someone is a world away, that they'll ask you the right questions and that they'll get it done and they know that you'll help them out. If it's a transactional thing where you're sending, cards over the fence every night, it's not going to work as well.
How did you accomplish that through COVID? I'm assuming there wasn't a lot of ability to fly and sort of cross-pollinate team members and do knowledge onboarding. How that must have been a big feat. How did you guys approach that? And as you're obviously very successful in this model, so I'm assuming you've got some innovative techniques you can teach the rest of us.
We really embraced Microsoft Teams. Actually, it wasn't something that was being used really heavily prior to COVID. It was kind of there, but we had a smattering of other tools that were used. So the Microsoft suite helped out there. Also, making sure that the partners were holding our hands through that process. Not everyone was an expert in doing this outsourcing. So it was helpful to do that too. And having the consolidated vendor set, I think really helped, because if you were looking to do this with all these kind of vendors and people just randomly coming in, it'd be really difficult. I think we got really lucky with the folks that we were working with, and it was a smooth onboarding process as we ramped up some teams. But overall, the piece that we missed, I think, is still essential, which is that travel and bringing people back and forth. We had some relocate to the US to help lead teams and bridge the time zones. But just recently, I was able to travel out and see some of the teams for the first time since COVID, and it makes a heck of a difference. I love that we can work virtually, but you don't get that trust and that speed of execution without really knowing someone.
And that ability to build that relationship is still important in doing business together. So it's been good to be able to get back on the road a bit. Let me ask you a question, Scott. As you guys were thinking of, consolidating that list, which is pretty impressive, from 100 plus down to a few, what were some of the criterias that you were looking for in a key partner? So for other leaders that are watching this, what are some of the critical things that partners have to have in order to enable success?
There's some entry points, like you can say, okay, do you have the bench strength? Do you have the recruiting abilities? But also, can you retain the talent? And how are you getting that talent in the door? Are you, going out to the market and picking off people using really good recruiting team, which some folks can do that and execute well? Or do you have something unique, a university system that you're relying on to onboard people in? Do you have the capabilities of really ramping someone up on a business domain, having kind of an internal university that is teaching them our business domain? Do you have those tools, or is it just, outsourced recruiting? So for me, it's having a partner that has great communication. They don't surprise you, but also someone that can hit those key objectives, like, speed of onboarding teams and retaining those teams.
So hiring practices, retention practices, and obviously transparency through all of that is important.
Yeah, the transparency is a huge one. We run into the most problems when a partner tries to fix something on their own. And you're like, well, if we fixed it together, that would be the best way. Versus, hey, we've been trying for a couple of weeks, but we couldn't retain this person. Like, okay, if you would have told us, we could have talked to them, tried to make it work, and we would have been better prepared.
How important is the oral written communication, when outsourcing technical work, for example? Is that still high on your criteria list?
It is, but I come up with a really key learning that sometimes, especially when you're interviewing folks from a different locale, people automatically make the assumption that good English skills equals high intelligence and ability to execute. And that's not necessarily the case. Engineers are sometimes introverts. They may not have the best English skills. Actually, most of the time it's an accent thing versus actual English ability. So you really have to separate all those things. Say, okay, the accent isn't how well it can communicate. Their communication skills don't necessarily equal their technical capabilities, and really trust those around the person to say, look, this guy's he's solid, or she's really amazing. We've seen her do great things on these projects, and focus on the best way to communicate with that person. So it could be asynchronous communication, so doing virtual stand-ups, doing a lot through chat, or just meet them where they are in terms of like what's the best way for them to communicate. Are they understanding you when you're communicating, but just are not good at speaking it back? It's very easy to throw up your hands and just say, you know what, I just can't understand this person. But if you do that, you're not going to unlock that global talent and the global diversity out there, which is a real shame. I think I see it happen a lot of times, but if you can focus on how can I make this work versus why it's not working, you'll be a lot more successful.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that, Scott. So as in closing, if you were to advise other leaders, right, based on your experiences, what are some of the pitfalls you would to forewarn them about, right? And what are some of the top two or so critical success factors? And I think you were talking kind of leading into that with sort of how you would handle the communication aspects. But what advice would you give to leaders that are about to embark on the journey that you've gone on with Cox Automotive and outsourcing?
I'll hit on one of the other things I mentioned earlier and expand on it a bit. Don't try to just take your current process and push it on this new journey that you're going on. This also applies to things like KPIs, right? You can just weaponize these KPIs. You can say you got to meet these things, and that means we're successful. But teams will ultimately game those. You have to trust each other. You need to really know that you've got both qualitative and quantitative rankings of how things are going. You need to actually travel out and meet people and embrace that. Make sure that you trust each other and see each other as equals. Do you ever have a situation where you're treating a partner differently? And I'm trying not to say the word vendor because I really don't like to see it that way. If your partner's in success, then you're going to succeed together. If you see it as like, hey, you need to do this, you need to do that, that's not the way to get things done. So if you can embrace that, if you can say, look, I'm going to work a little bit differently because I have a global team. I'm going to use these time zones to my advantage to get things done while I'm sleeping. I'm going to, bridge the gap in between time zones to make things easier, versus, hey, I'm going to have this person stay up all night. Like, no one's going to do their best work if you put those kind of things on them. So it's understanding the reality of folks' situation, where they're living, how they operate, and then using it to your advantage versus trying to kind of do a square peg in a round hole.
So focus on the partnership and try to make it a win-win situation for yourself, your partner, as well as all the people working on the program.
Absolutely.
Sounds like wonderful advice. And I know that at Softensity, we appreciate, Scott, the partnership that you've given us, as well as Cox Automotive, and hope that partnership continues for a long time to come.
Absolutely. Same here. Thanks. I really appreciate it. This has been a great opportunity for me as well.
Thank you, Scott, for all of your insights, and wish you a wonderful day.
All right. Thanks. Take care, everybody.